Members of the Senate, shall we start with an observance of a moment of silence? Thank you very much. Fellow members of Senate, and all those who are joining us via the virtual platform, members of the Krause family, it is with profound sadness and a deep sense of loss that we gather here this afternoon to honor and pay tribute to our fallen colleague and friend, Professor Rui Krause. We took an unprecedented decision to convene this extraordinary sitting of Senate to afford senators an opportunity to celebrate the life of one of our own. Many of us are still reeling in shock. We are still trying to process what has just happened and trying to make sense of it. Many of us are hoping that someone will shake us up and say, no, it was just a bad dream. So we gather this afternoon in this hallowed chamber, not just to mourn, but to celebrate a life, a special life, lived in the service of humanity. Many of us were on the receiving end of Rui's kindness and generosity of spirit. Rui was always generous with his thoughtful and insightful observations and ideas on a wide range of issues. His humanity and his unimpeachable integrity and his genuineness always shone true. He served this Senate with great distinction and was an active academic citizen of this university. Many of us are still dazed. We very much wish we could see him around sitting somewhere there. Rui always commanded an authoritative presence. I must say I always valued his honesty and his thoughtful advice and unqualified support. So on behalf of our Chancellor, Justice Lexon Party, our Chair of Council, Judge Gerald Bloom, Chair of our Board of Governors, Mr. Andy Lesangu, and all members of Council and the Board of Governors, and indeed the entire Rhodes University community, we offer our deepfelt condolences to the Krause family and friends, to Rui's colleagues, to the Department of Chemistry, to his research collaborators and to his students. We have a number of speakers who have been requested to come and address Senate and convey their tributes so that the family can be comforted in knowing that we are with them in this difficult time. Rui will always has left an incredible legacy in the students he supervised, in the monumental contribution in research, all intended to benefit humanity. May I invite Professor Suri to offer his tribute on behalf of Senate as the most senior member of Senate. Professor.
Members of Senate, in the many years of the Senate's existence, its members have enthused, celebrated, argued, bemoaned, voted, participated, not to mention walked out, welcomed, waved goodbye, and occasionally mourned. After today, we will need to change the occasionally mourned to mourned. It is not often that members of Senate gather in remembrance of a colleague who has passed on whilst an active member of Senate. Colleagues somewhat longer in the tooth than others will recall with great fondness Professor Ralph Braw of the Department of Computer Science, who passed away in 1980, when incidentally I was a second-year student in that department, and Professor John Moore of the Department of Geology, who passed on in 2012. Today, we add to this list Rui Werner Macedo Krause, Professor of Organic Chemistry and Nanomaterials and Director of the Center for Chemico and Biomedicinal Research. In 2012, Rui left the University of Johannesburg to join Rhodes University as Professor of Chemistry and take his rightful place in the Senate. Always seated in the middle of the so-called raised rows, at the back of the chamber, Rui brought to Senate a suitcase of experience as lecturer, senior lecturer, associate professor, strong researcher, and across differently designated institutions. For the years 2016 to 2019, he also brought to Senate his experience as head of department. Somewhat dishevelled in clothing, but never in thought and ideas, somewhat stumbling in gait, but never in argument, Rui would consider a matter and then speak, and senators would listen attentively. Nor was he afraid to tackle sensitive issues head-on, whether they related to building alterations or finance systems, and the executive would listen attentively. Courteous to a flaw, Rui always had time for his colleagues, always time for me. My modicum of chemistry knowledge was no impediment to an engagement with Rui on a range of chemistry topics. And I'm sure much the same goes for other senators with and without chemical accoutrements. Always eager to assist, who can forget Rui's contribution to a visit by colleagues from Brazil when he served as probably the most qualified and intellectual translator. If Google Translate is to be believed, Rui certainly knew the difference between a molecule and an atomo. The 2022 research report included an article on Rui entitled The Nature of Chemistry. The lead paragraph read as follows. Professor Rui Krause is an eclectic chemist and teacher at Rhodes University. His research interests have spanned alkaloids from poison dart frogs, green chemistry, new forms of antibiotics, and squishy smart drugs. The alkaloids, frogs, green chemistry and antibiotics didn't bother me much, but the squishy smart drugs did make me think. Was there more to the dishevelled clothing and the stumbling gait of our Senator Krause? My concern was somewhat assuaged by a later explanation that the work was located in the realm of drug delivery and biodegradable nanoparticles. Who would have thought, eh? Called upon to reflect on the role of a senator, called upon to reflect on the contribution of a senator, called upon to say goodbye to a senator who is passed on in service is no easy task for Senate and no easy task for senators from the Department of Chemistry and the I&I, but a task we should embrace in celebration rather than in sadness. Rui added value, manifest value wherever he found himself. Today, Senate bids farewell to one of its own, to his wife and family, friends, colleagues, students and collaborators. Senate extends its deepest condolences. Senate will not forget his role in our lives, countless colleagues and students' lives, nor will we forget the alkaloids, frogs, green chemistry, antibiotics, and certainly not the squishy smart drugs. Rest in peace, Professor Krause. Professor Joe Damas, the Dean of the Faculty of Science, will now address Senate.
Afternoon, colleagues. Professor Rui Krause began his academic journey at the University of Witwatersrand, where he completed his postgraduate studies. Like every young academic, he held several positions, mainly from the former Technikon Witwatersrand, which later became the University of Johannesburg. After joining the Faculty of Science at Rhodes University 12 years ago, he immediately established his research in fundamental organic and medicinal chemistry, natural products, drug delivery, and nanomaterials. This research investigates natural bioactive ingredients which have beneficial uses and the synthesis thereof. Much of his research has focused on marine species, taking advantage of the biodiversity found in Algoa Bay due to the meeting of two ocean currents. Recent interest has also been in natural siderophores, compounds that assimilate iron, and how these may be combined with antibiotics for enhancing efficacy. This type of research cannot be achieved without high-end instruments, and Rui loved his gadgets. He was fundamental in sourcing funding for instruments such as the nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer, NMR, and other instruments such as the LCMS. He established these facilities here at Rhodes and managed them with a hands-on approach. I recall several faculty board meetings where he advocated for a long-term plan for the maintenance and replacement of high-end instruments, not only in these facilities, but generally throughout the faculty. Prof Krause has graduated over 60 postgraduate students at all levels, but he was more than just a supervisor, he was also a mentor. He encouraged his students to publish their research, guiding them through this somewhat daunting process. His nearly 200 publications, comprising books, chapters in books, and articles, have been cited over 6,000 times. In recognition of his international reputation, he obtained an NRF C2 rating and has been listed in the top 30 Rhodes researchers list on several occasions. Last year, in the 2020 annual research report, he was placed 5th on this list. Regardless of these achievements, Rui would never tell you about them. He remained humble. He was also professionally associated with the Royal Chemistry Society, Chemical Society, the American Chemical Society, and the South African Chemical Institute, serving as the chairperson for the Eastern Cape. His academic life has been cut short, but his legacy will live on in the faculty and the students that he has guided as they too develop their academic careers. We will miss his rather quirky smile and twinkle in the eye, and his many arguments well thought out during faculty meetings. We extend our condolences to his family, friends, and colleagues. You will always be remembered. Rest in peace, Professor Rui Krause. I will now hand over to Professor Rosa Klein, Head of the Chemistry Department.
Thank you, Jo. When I first came to Senate, it was because Rui was taking a much-needed sabbatical, and I was acting HOD, and I got a pack of Senate notes back in the day before we abandoned printing. And I could not imagine how I was going to fill the shoes that Rui had left behind in order to take a break. And then I had to become HOD because, again, the university needed to give this brilliant researcher time to actually do what he was born to do. Well, the past few days have needed lots of prayer and wisdom, not just because we have lost a senator, a colleague, a senior colleague, one who carried a lot of weight in the department. And it's not just because of all the practical administrative arrangements that must be made when someone leaves the department, especially when someone dies. But it's because my colleagues and I have been fielding dozens, if not hundreds, of calls and messages and emails from across the world of all the people that this humble, generous, mischievous colleague has met and welcomed into his heart. He made collaborators into friends, and he warmly opened his heart to so many people. And so we haven't really had time to mourn for ourselves. We are at the center of a community across the world who all knew Rui and really, really miss and grieve for him. Rui loved his family. He loved his wife and his daughters so much. And he still had so much love left over for dozens of students. You heard from Jo how many students he's graduated. And he currently has about 15 in his lab. And each one has a place in his heart. You know, each one was important. They felt important when he was with them. They felt like they mattered. They felt supported, cared for, and cared about. Each of those students became swept up in his enthusiasm and his intelligent, carefully thought out, but sometimes a little bit crazy ideas. I mean, what's a scientist if they're not a little bit on the edge or over the edge? And we see the evidence, the fruitfulness of his endeavors in the number of his students who are now academics all over Africa and still collaborate with him and still miss him terribly. Rui must have caused a small difficulty in NRF rating panels because his research was not focused. And we saw this in departmental seminars where one student would present something on pediatric doses of tuberculosis drugs, and another student would present on isolating alkaloids from erythrina afra. And they were both his students, and he engaged in that research with such enthusiasm. So his wide scope went all the way from nanotechnology through medicinal chemistry, all the way. No, green chemistry was not a separate theme to him. It was the underlying principle in so much that he did. When we made a decision last month to address some budget deficits, and we agreed that we would no longer pay for, out of departmental funds, for chloroform or dichloromethane, he said people shouldn't be using them anyway. They're bad for the environment. But his research was driven in equal parts by this incredible intellectual curiosity and the aforementioned love for gadgets. Every new toy that came into the department, he developed several projects that would work alongside with that toy. And you will hear later from Dr. Smith, who he collaborated with freely because Vincent had a new toy. And it wasn't enough that Rui would go and play and see what the toy could do. He would become fully educated on how to take it apart and put it back together and how to service the different parts. He was supremely intelligent and in a practical way, as every chemist should be. His network of collaborators and friends really bridged language. I contacted one of his collaborators in Brazil because one of our students is there, and he said, is there something official that I can release to his collaborators here in Brazil and the ones in Germany? And I'm like, the ones in Germany? It was impossible to keep track of all the people who have been affected by his loss, by our loss. We will miss him. We will miss his warmth, his sense of humor. We will miss his levity more than his gravity. But we are very grateful that he made Makanda his final stop on his academic journey. We are very grateful that when he decided to travel, he always came back. And I am grateful that I got to be the HOD that stepped in so that he could freely pursue all his many interests. And now I get to hand over to one of his many local collaborators, Rosie Dorrington.
Good afternoon, Chair. I am not used to having to do something like this. I have been at Rhodes University for 30 years, and I have never spoken at a Senate meeting to say goodbye to a colleague. But this is really special. So I want to talk about my experience of Professor Rui Krause. And in particular, I want to tell you about how we bonded over one of Rui's toys. I'm a microbiologist. I see chemistry in terms of chicken wire structures. Apologies to the department. I understand what they do, but don't ask me what an NMR spectrum looks like. But I do understand, thanks to my collaboration with Rui, how important it is to do rigorous chemistry research. I first got to know Rui when we took on a joint student, Jarmo Kalinski, and between the three of us, we really did unrough some of the rough edges on all three of us, and we developed an interest in using one of Rui's toys, the new mass spectrometer that arrived in 2017, to really develop a discovery platform for finding new compounds in natural products discovery. And Joe has mentioned natural products are chemicals produced by living organisms. They are invariably produced for a reason, and they are really good chemical compounds that can be used to develop new drugs. Rui and I bonded over this instrument that he knew as intimately as a family member. that he loved as much as part of his family. And that really changed the way in which we did the research in the field of drug discovery and natural products. And the reason for that was that Rui understood that the new way of doing things was in a multidisciplinary approach, and that you couldn't be siloed in your field or your subfield or your subdiscipline, and that the way we were going to make new breakthroughs was by collaborating across the divides of different disciplines. And since 2016, it's been a remarkably productive collaboration where I've learned huge amounts, and I've grown as a researcher. Rui worked incredibly hard to develop the applications of mass spectrometry, and in particular the applications of metabolomics. And this is the chemical fingerprints of living organisms, and in our particular case, the chemical fingerprints of the natural products that were produced by marine organisms in Algoa Bay. Rui and I often talked about how blessed we were by the astounding biodiversity just off our doorstep. And we were talking about getting him on the boat on one of our expeditions. And sadly, we never quite got there. And I'll get back to that. But he worked incredibly hard to broaden the applications of this instrument so that it wasn't just siloed in fundamental chemistry research, but that it became that there were applications that people from across the disciplines at Rhodes could use for their research. And I mentioned the IWR and our department in particular. But he also developed and built capacity for metabolomics research, not only at the university, but at institutions nationally and all across Africa and the global south. He collaborated widely. I tried to look up all the people he collaborated with, and I gave up because he was just so widely networked. And he will be mourned by a group of people that we just haven't even identified yet. So Rui, as Joe mentioned, was and Rosa, he was an unusual academic and researcher. He didn't fit the mold of what the NRF and other institutions considered to be how research should be done, and in particular focusing on a narrow research field, becoming an expert in that field. And the way I see it now, the world of black and white and some shades of grey in between. Rui's attitude to research was completely different. I think he navigated in a landscape of glorious technicolor for his research. He was interested in everything. Anything that caught his eye, he was there, and he gave it as much consideration and attention as he did to everything in his life. And as a result of that, while it's not the conventional way in which we rate research, Rui's contribution in the long term will be far more important than if he had stuck to a narrow research field. And I learnt a great deal from him. Rui wasn't just a successful person. He was a successful academic, and he was a successful researcher. He was a successful teacher and supervisor of students, but what made Rui really special was he was a successful human being. And the world has very few genuinely successful human beings. And I've learned that it's more important to be a successful human being than it is to be a successful person, and Rui taught me that. I have colleagues who have commented that when Rui spoke to you, you felt really special. He was always upbeat. He always made you feel better. But we noticed that when he walked away, his shoulders would sag sometimes, and it would be obvious that he was carrying the weight of much bigger considerations on those shoulders. And I think I've been trying to make sense of our loss. We can't change the fact that that we've lost him, but I really think we need to take stock of the way we do things. We need to start to think about living our lives in glorious technicolor instead of straight lines and black and white. We need to take notice of each other the way Rui did. We need to have peripheral vision. We need to see things that aren't necessarily very obvious. And I think as an institution, we really need to focus on being successful human beings. I will miss Rui. Like Rosa, I haven't really given myself a chance to grieve for him, and I will. But I intend to honor his legacy by building on what he's done. And when the new mass spectrometer comes, we will have the Professor Rui Krause facility of mass spectrometry and all other things. And we will laugh at all the things that he made us do. We will remember the levity instead of the gravity. Gunda and the girls, we are with you. We are here to support you. You're part of our community, and you will continue to be part of our community. You know you can lean on us if you need anything. Rui is my honorary brother, and I will really miss him. Oh, sorry, I'm handing over to Dr. Vincent.
VC, TVCs, good afternoon, colleagues, members of the Senate. I come to pay tribute to a friend, Rui Krause. In 2016, my life was forever changed when Rui appointed me as a lecturer in the Department of Chemistry. What began as a professional relationship blossomed into a friendship spanning 8 years, filled with collaboration, laughter, and mutual respect. There are many words that come to mind when I think of Rui. Love, kindness, humility, intellect, generosity of spirit. His love for people was boundless, and he showed this through the immense care he gave his students, many of whom traveled from far and wide to study under him, to learn with him, and to sit at his feet. He treated everyone with equal respect, regardless of their background or status, never standing on ceremony. Rui was approachable, warm, and always had time for others, giving guidance, even when his own plate was overflowing. Rui had a remarkable ability to balance both heart and mind, seamlessly blending his deep faith and with a rigorous commitment to science. His intellect was vast, and I often marveled at how he could know so much about so many things. And yet, despite his brilliance, Rui remained humble. He spoke to everyone, no matter their position, with the same care and respect, always willing to help and uplift others, often placing their needs ahead of his. His sense of humor, often that of a classic dad joke, never failed to lighten the mood. That humor was just one of the many ways he reconnected with those around him, drawing people in with his warmth and openness. His humanity touched everyone who knew him, and his entrepreneurial drive, coupled with a deep, deep love for books, reflected his constant pursuit of knowledge and betterment. In Rui, I found not just a colleague, but a dear friend. His memory will live on and lives on in all those he touched, in the students he mentored, the colleagues he inspired, and the countless others who were fortunate enough to know him. Rui was and will always be a man of faith, of science, and above all, of love. Hink ile lakrime, ambagache, salamika kushle. Sorry. I introduce Dr. Bertha Chitambo and Tebang Natlapeng.
Good afternoon, DVCs, members of Senate, friends and colleagues. It's sad to talk, my first talk with Senate members in this sad situation. But we are Prof Krause's students, and he was my host now with my PGCE. So we are going just to read messages from across the world, from different students who have passed through Rui's life. So bear with us. There's a lot of reading, but I hope we'll do it in time.
Good afternoon. Let's start. Prof Rui Krause's impact on us is immeasurable. My journey with him began during an unforgettable lecture at the University of Johannesburg, where his passion for science inspired me deeply. He just didn't teach science, he taught me to embrace life, seize opportunities, and conquer my fears. More than a supervisor, he was a father figure, a mentor, and a friend who supported me through struggles with both toughness and empathy. His kindness, contagious love for science, and laughter opened my heart to a new world. He represented the best of humanity. His legacy lives on in the lives he touched, and may his soul rest in peace. Prof Rui Krause has been the most amazing academic I've encountered. He was a spring of knowledge, resourceful and very proactive. He always found the best in everyone. He accommodated me as a part-time research and understood my schedule. He could even make time to meet me on the weekends. He organized funding for me for research and for conferences, always including everyone. The thought that his untimely departure was when he was on a mission to get my NMR samples from Stellenbosch has really hit me hard. I was almost giving up on my research, but for his memory, I endeavor to complete it. We have indeed lost, but we soldier on, knowing that we have a race to run, until we gather again at the river from the throne room of God. Good night, Prof.
There's just so much he has done for me. Prof was like a father, a friend, and he was loving and caring. He took care of all of us, his students, according to our individual needs. I am one of the students Prof nurtured and turned into a mass spec specialist. Without Prof, none of this would have been possible. He allowed us to follow our interests and play. Working with Prof was fun more than anything because he gave us freedom to explore. Losing Prof Krause is akin to losing everything in a life. Life would be hard to live without him. May he rest well, and may God comfort his family.
I am deeply saddened by the passing of my supervisor, a man who gave me a golden ticket to life-changing opportunities when I was in the dark post my undergraduate degree. Professor was someone who believed in his students a lot. He was always willing to help his students when in need. He selflessly helped all of his students during the hard times of COVID-19. He also volunteered to help people around Grahamstown during the lockdown. As a member of the chemistry department family at Rhodes University, he always made sure that the day-to-day running of the NMR was perfect. He was always willing to help if the NMR was not working well, either during the week or the weekend. He would always avail himself. This is a huge loss to the department, his research group, and the university. I will always remember Professor as an altruistic human being who always wanted people to thrive in life, who devoted his life to chemistry and the science community.
I am deeply saddened by the passing of Prof Rui Krause, a brilliant, rational scientist and an inspiring mentor. His passion for research, unwavering dedication, and gentle guidance left a permanent mark on everyone fortunate enough to work with him. Prof Krause's wisdom extended far beyond science. He nurtured curiosity and kindness in all of us. His legacy will continue to shape our paths, and his absence will be deeply felt. We lost a precious person, someone always positive and approachable. In moments like these, I found comfort in the words of this Holy Scripture. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Psalm 34, verse 18. May we find comfort in knowing that his life was a blessing to many. And though he is no longer with us, his impact will live on. My heartfelt condolences go to his family and all who loved him. He will forever be remembered with admiration and gratitude. May his family and loved ones find peace. And this divine assurance, knowing that Prof Krause's legacy is now held in eternal light and love, I have no words to say. Rest in peace.
Professor Rui Krause, frequently cited as a professor of organic chemistry, medicinal chemistry, and nanotechnology. But he was much more than that. I was somewhat surprised to find a genius who could teach me things in subjects that seemed to be outside of organic chemistry instead of the specialist in organic synthesis that I had anticipated. He asked me one day if I thought he was a good supervisor, and I told him that he was an excellent one. However, as of right now, he was the greatest. Speaking with him was similar to going to the library. His level of knowledge was phenomenal. In addition to explaining the fundamentals of instrument operation and the data that might be obtained from them, he could fix broken instruments. He was an outstanding researcher of great simplicity and inexplicable humility in views of his many skills. He had great communication skills, both in writing and speaking. He wrote with a voice that was audible when he edited a document. And after reading, you were able to sort out the uncertainty because he was so specific. I had the clear feeling that he knew our work more than we did sometimes. But what can you say about his recommendation letters anyway? His storytelling abilities were truly remarkable. He instilled in us values that we shall retain even after his departure. Prof. Rui was a genius, a good mentor, a man full of humor, and a father to his students. He single-handedly played the role of more than 10 people. It will be difficult, if not impossible, to replace him. I didn't believe superheroes existed until I met Prof. Rui Krause.
Prof Krause was such a kind-hearted person. He welcomed me to his lab with great enthusiasm. Despite my initial difficulties with English, he tried his best to facilitate my integration. Beyond his professional excellence, he was committed to mentoring others and help them grow. For example, he took me to multiple conferences, even at his own expense. It would take me forever to enumerate anecdotes of his kindness, but the perfect illustration is him donating his body to science, a testament of how dedicated he was to the improvement of mankind. My sincere condolences to his family, especially his wife and daughters. May God give them the strength to surmount such tragedy.
Prof. Rui Krause's conversations were filled with depth, insight, humor, humility, and kindness. His ability to make even the most complex ideas seem accessible was a rare gift. He wasn't just a professor. He was someone who truly believed in the power of knowledge. Despite his many accomplishments, he had a way of making you feel like the most important person in the room as he always listened with intent, and I count myself fortunate to have been one of the lives he touched, even if it was just for a brief moment. I will always cherish our connection, and like so many others, I will miss him deeply. Rest in peace, Prof. You left this world far too soon, but your light will continue to shine through the many lives you have touched.
Dear Rui, it is very unfair that of all people closest to me during this difficult time, it is you I would feel the most free to lean on. And I'm confident most of the Rhodes University Chemistry Department can attest to that. Thank you for your consistent encouragement and support. A bit too brief of a timeline for my liking. Rest easy. Prof, I sent you a birthday message, and I knew you were going to respond even after a couple of days, but it was not so this time. It is very difficult for me to talk about Prof Rui Krause in the past tense. Prof was very knowledgeable. Sometimes I would wonder if there is anything this guy does not know. I bumped into him at CSIR. I shared with him my research work, and he had some comments, and I was surprised because I thought it was my moment to teach him. As his student, one would go to him to consult him. Instead, he would leave his office with so many things he suggested one could try, and he did that to all of us. That taught me to analyze better and make decisions. You talk about a scripture in the Bible, Prof has something to say, and I asked him something along the purpose of Jesus washing his disciples' feet and instructing his disciples to do the same to one another. The comment he gave me was a revelation to me. Prof loved the Lord. I called him a few weeks back, but he was busy baking. Prof was a giver. He allowed me to stay in his flat at his home for a few months, free of charge. Ma'am Gonda, thank you as well. Prof was compassionate. Prof Louis had a beautiful soul. He was a supervisor and a parent to all of us, his students. Prof was humble. Prof would join us to clean the lab at times, and I would wonder what kind of a professor does that. Prof would spoil us with pizza after cleaning the lab. I remember him inviting his research group to his place for a meal that he prepared himself. A very welcoming person. I remember myself and Gugu and Prof's car. Music was playing and Prof was singing along, and Gugu commented that how come God gave so much to this guy? We were jealous a bit. Prof ubetanda ukudlala at times. I remember Gugu took Prof sweets without his permission, and she said to me, Prof will think you are the one who took the sweets. Then the other day, myself and Gugu, we went to his office, and the first thing Prof said as we entered, he pointed at me saying, you took my sweets. At that time, Gugu is laughing, and I said, the culprit is standing next to me. Prof imparted knowledge to us. He wanted us to know and understand what we were doing. I remember I was struggling to produce a catalyst. The procedure was reported in a publication. After some time, I got the clean spectrum. I was so excited. I showed him the result, and the response I got was, what else? When he finds you running samples, be ready for questions. From how the instrument operates, the principle behind what you are doing, and so on. Prof wanted us to be the best. I would talk Kushon Ilanga about Prof. I have known Prof Rui from UJ, University of Johannesburg. Asiphelelanga kushoda uRui Krause. Rest, Prof, you saved. You saved all of us in the chemistry department. All I can say is thank you. I am very proud to have worked with you, and I am grateful. You will be in our memories for a longest time. The world is poorer without you. Your writing skills were superb. I know Mama Gunda gave you some lessons without doubt. Mam Gunda and the girls, I love you. We feel the pain and it's deep. F22ians, may God comfort you, and to all his colleagues, may you find comfort in the Lord. To his family, may you find comfort in the Lord in this trying time. Rest in power, RWK.
This tribute goes to Rui Krause, my supervisor and my mentor. He will always be in my heart for the career path he has shown to me, inspiring in many different ways. He was such a humble man with great respect, yet at the same time holding high maturity level and intelligence. More importantly, I will always remember him as someone who was very ambitious, striving for a bright future and achievement in the field of biomedical sciences, not only in South Africa, but within the continent of Africa. In short, his life is a reflection of a gift, a star, talent, and light which was given to us by God himself. Okay. To me, Prof Krause was more than a supervisor. He played a father role. He helped me through the toughest time in my life. He was a wonderful man. He never discriminated, and he valued everyone's opinion. Like a parent, he gave so many opportunities to us. He loved to laugh. As I say this, his laughter echoes in my head. He was very funny. His office is filled with posters that will crack you up. My academic father was passionate about science and science communication. This was seen from the shirts he wore, the ice cream he made for everyone, and the projects he urged us to pursue that involved communicating our work to the community. This is a difficult time for everyone who knew him, more so his family. Our condolences to them. We pray for strength and courage for them to be able to bear this irreparable loss. Prof. Rui was a definite example of one who served others, one who understood the value of serving others in this life. No one has happened to be in his space. No one who has happened to be in his space could miss the aura of service to others he exuded. The fruits and evidence of his service abound in Makhanda, nationally and internationally. We celebrate his life of enriching impact and service to others, and trust by God's grace, those of us impacted will also be encouraged to serve others well in our spaces and beyond in the life we are given. Our ultimate example, Jesus Christ, showed the ultimate selflessness in laying down. He set his life to set us free. We must always seek to imitate his selfless love by serving others instead of simply serving ourselves.
Okay, this is the last one, and it's a special one, especially that Dr. Blessing Umeko Lisole, I'll just have to mention your name. She just joined us yesterday, and she's never met Prof Krause. And she was really heartbroken. Say, how will I begin to talk about your kindness, which I have seen and experienced only but virtually? Arriving at Rhodes University yesterday and receiving to me the strange news of your passing is a very big shock to me. No wonder you didn't reply your WhatsApp messages that I sent while on transit to Rhodes University. We had a long discussion on the success of my stay here and assurances of your arrangements for a fruitful stay, only to come to the reality of our existence that I will never see you. Rest on, Father, from this part of the world. Kindness personified, gift of true science. The list will be endless, because discrimination is a word that never existed in your relationship with people, no matter where they came from. May your labor of love continue to be a blessing to the lovely family you left behind. Adieu, Prof. Thank you so much.
As we draw this program to a close, some of you will know that Professor Krause was a person of deep faith, and he was a devout Catholic who served the community of St. Patrick's for many, many years. So we will offer the words which are used in the Catholic faith and say, eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May the souls of the faithful departed, through the mercy of God, rest in peace. Fare thee well, dear colleague and friend, Requescat and Barker. We will invite you to send your own messages of condolences by email. We will provide an email, and we will collate all of those, put them together so that we can share them with the family. To all of you, thank you for making time for this extraordinary sitting of Senate. This concludes our proceedings. Thank you.